All right, everybody. Hello. Today we are going to make some thread-wrapped buttons. They are going to be appropriate for 16th and 17th century clothing, and I really love putting these on doublets and pants. The set we're making today is specifically for a friend of mine who has a black and gold dress, so I need to make some in black. First thing that you're going to need is some black embroidery floss. I'm just going to be using cotton for these because this is something we expect to be washable for her. You're going to want some wooden beads to make up the core. If you're finding that your holes for these beads aren't thick enough, definitely just take a quick drill and a small drill bit. You can drill out the hole a little bit more. Get yourself some more room. I also am going to use my handy dandy thimble and a sharp embroidery needle and some scissors. But let's get moving, huh? Well, another trick you can use if your holes are too small on the center of your bead would be to split your thread. That's part of why I like using the cotton embroidery floss for some of these. It definitely helps if you're cutting the thread thickness in half. In period, these would have been embroidered with silk. Most of the examples are silk. There are a couple that are metal thread. Those are really fun to see and try and puzzle out. But we are just going to use the cotton for this project because it's going to more or less approximate what we're going for. And when you're doing something that you haven't done in a while, sometimes it's easier to do this as a trial run with materials that aren't quite so dear to you. So you do you. You're going to notice I just tied a giant loop around the button. I'm going to start calling this wooden bead the button because that's what it's going to become. But we ran the needle through, pulled it back, tied it on here, and now I'm going to do basically a buttonhole stitch around this button. And when I'm done, I want to end with just one loop being created. And as you see these, just keep following that around. I like to end in an odd number, so with 7 or 9. Another thing to remember as you're working on these would be that the more ribs you put in here, the more thread it's going to take to make one of these buttons. So you're going to get better coverage as your threads are looped around each individual spoke that we're creating. But at the same time, you might run into it taking 2 or 3 times as long just to do this portion. Alright, so we have 9 spokes. My first thing I'm going to do is take my needle and run it underneath the original spoke, the one that I created that knot for. So we're going to go under it, wrap around, and out. Do that couple more times, and really that's the only thing you have to do. You're just going to do this for eternity around the edge of your button. Alright, so that stitch is really all you're doing all the way around. So these are a super awesome project for kind of vegging out on the couch and watching your favorite TV show, which is what I'm going to do with the other 16 that I need.
It takes just a little bit of extra work to do buttons like these, but I think it adds a real flair, especially when you're doing them down the center front of one of your garments. I hope you've been enjoying a little montage while I made a second one where I wasn't using such a dark colored wooden bead. Right now, let's take a look at how to finish off a thread and restart one, because especially when you're using larger beads to try and get a button out, you're likely going to have to change out your thread at some point. So go ahead and tuck that loose end back into the top, right where you got everything started and you're working away from it. You can weave that through some of the stitches that you've done before and trim that off. I like to trim off any of my excess tails before I start adding on my new piece of thread. Once you've tied a knot in the back side of that string, for your new working thread, go ahead and pull it up through the unworked side of your bead, and you're going to have that knot catch inside of the stitches inside the button. Then weave your needle through the stitches back down to where you were working. Wrap it around that spoke and just keep working. It's really that easy, and if you're keeping a good compressed tension where you're not getting a lot of gaps where you can see the button underneath, it shouldn't be really noticeable when you've had to change a string out. Vice versa, when you go to finish off a button altogether, you're also going to push the needle from the base of the button where you just got to, up through your starting point and back. That's going to help anchor those stitches. Now that you've got a couple of complete buttons, let's take a look at how we're going to attach them to a garment. You didn't really think I'd leave you hanging, right? You'll want to leave a tail on the end of your button if you can, and then go take a little bite out of the fabric where you've marked it. This can either be on the edge or sitting onto the face of your fabric. Depends on the sizing and what you need to do with how you tailored that garment. Once you've got that little bite taken out, go ahead and weave the needle back and forth from the fabric through a couple of the spokes at the very bottom of your button. This would be the side that you were just working on, and that tail should be coming out of. I will do this at least 3 or 4 times, that way I have between 6 and 8 threads going back and forth between the garment and my button. I've discovered that gives me a really secure fit. Once I have that little bit of wiggle space up at the top, and I can pull the button away just a smidge, I'm going to wrap my thread around the base of it. This is called creating a shape, and there's a couple reasons to do it. The first and foremost reason is going to be it's going to make the button way easier to use on your garment while you're trying to get it closed. After you make that shape, go ahead and transfer your needle to the back side, knot off your string, and then tuck the end into the lining somewhere and snip it off. Super easy, and you magically have a functioning button that you made yourself. Are you proud of yourself yet? I think you should be. I really hope you've been enjoying this little tutorial on how to make your own buttons. They're a super beginner-friendly project, at least with this style. They can become more and more complex as the centuries wore on, as well as just people finding different styles that they enjoyed. But this is a super simple one. It requires just a couple stitches, and you can make it yourself in an afternoon. I think each one of these with my practice was taking about 30 minutes to 45 minutes a piece. But as always, thank you for watching. I hope you're all being wonderful to each other out there, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Hi. Are you going to help with the button? It's a button. Button? Who's got the button?